Get inspired, get motivated with Maya Akai and the Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking, thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find Maya on Twitter and Instagram at Maya_Akai. On Facebook at Maya Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything Maya at MayaAkai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 76 of Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Let's talk the wealth gap. We have an amazing guest on today, but I'm kind of liking that the intro was a little sticky, and it's okay because I feel like this is one of those conversations that might get a little hairy and interesting. So I feel like the intro of the show is just leading into some of the aha moments and how you're going to be like, I thought this should be like that. So it's okay that it was a little kind of, a rough start, but here we are. As you know, the podcast, it looks to embrace salient topics related to mental wellness. So you might be saying to yourself, well, why are we talking finances? Because your financial decisions are some of the most mental and emotional choices that you actually make. And where you are at mentally in those choices make a difference. So when I say I want to bring salient topics to the table, right now in the current climate, a lot of people are struggling with finances and don't understand the economy, and they're hearing tariffs and all kinds of things and have no idea what to make of it. Well, our guest today is going to help us to figure a lot of those things out, or at least illuminate some things that you didn't know. And I love the fact that I say here, we like to pull back that veil of self-doubt and sabotage that so many of us experience in our life. And I want to help you to identify that ambition and how to harness those things to be motivated. So if you have a financial goal in this show today to help you understand how to be able to get there. So if you are a first-time listener or viewer, welcome. I always say just buckle up for safety because occasionally it can be an unexpected bumpy ride. Not in a bad way, but you just might have an aha moment or go, wow. Or as I like to say, things that make you go, Only my old folks will understand what that song is. And if you want to go look it up, it's CNC Music Factory. Things that make you go, Great song. Good music, by the way. Of course, if you are a returning listener or viewer, welcome back. You're more than familiar with how we do things here. I always say you've carved out at least 30 minutes to an hour of your time to be part of the podcast. So find that spot that's nice and quiet. Grab a pencil, paper so you can jot down, take notes because it's worthy of that. I say grab your, drink of choice, coffee, tea. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Have a glass of wine. I don't care. Just be involved in the podcast. Remember, you can always get involved in the conversation by posting things in the comments. We'll review them. And if it's a great question for our guests, we're going to pop it on screen and talk about things that you might be asking. So you can be integrated with the show. This is the 8th installment of the Ambition shows, which is kind of an offshoot of Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. And we have had amazing guests that have been there. So if you've missed any of the previous episodes, just remember you can always find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audibles, and Spotify platforms. Just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Of course, the easy thing to do is if you just subscribe and share my YouTube channel at Maya Speaks to You, you'll always know when there's a podcast coming up. And of course, that is my social media handles. I finally got with it and have all my social media handles being the same. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Maya Speaks to You. And of course, the easy thing is too, if you just go to my webpage, www.maya-speaks.com, you can find all things Maya there, including 2 things I'm super passionate about. 1, my menopause blog, which is called Me on Pause, which broaches a lot of serious conversations about being perimenopausal or menopausal that women don't know. And by the way, fellas, I've just come to realize I probably need to expand that conversation to include you, because despite what you probably don't know, you have your own version of menopause. It's called andropause. And it mirrors a lot of things that women experience. So I realized I can't leave the fellas out, right? I gotta share information with you. So check out that blog. And of course, there is my inspirational blog that I post every Wednesday. Just a salient thought for you to think about, something to chew on. I post once a week that inspirational thought. So on Wednesdays, Me on Pause goes a post as well as my inspirational blog. So before we jump into episode 75, which I'm so excited to talk about these things, remember last week was a really powerful episode, or 2 weeks ago. We had on Shauna Rosenzweig, who is the CEO of Campfire. And this was one of those episodes that was about youth empowerment, where Campfire has been around for 115 years. And they work with kids as young as grade school all the way through high school to put empowerment, but they're also big on STEM. And they do something about focusing on helping emotional and mental growth. So they have a lot of great programs. They are around the country. And if it's something that interests you, you can reach out to Campfire and maybe bring something like that to your community. If you feel you have a lot of youth that maybe are struggling with bullying, maybe even just kind of adjusting with school or anxiety, Campfire might be the place that those kids can grow. But without that being said, let's jump into our ninth guest, Paul Musson, who is, for what I want to say, the financial guru. So he is a founder of Paddington Capital Management, and he's a former lead portfolio manager for the Ivy funds at Mackenzie Investment. Why he is the perfect guest right now on M.A.Y.A is his approach to self-improvement so aligns with what we do here about pulling back that curtain on financial systems that can quietly but powerfully shape your life. His current book, In Capital Offence, Why Some Benefits at Your Expense, Paul explains pretty much relatable terms about central banks, government policy, and entrenched economic structures that inadvertently, but yet systematically, oh, by the word, that has become such a dirty word, systematically. You know, people don't like words like that, but honestly, it's true, have extracted wealth from ordinary people like you and I. So he focuses on trying to enrich a small, amount of people to understand this is how what the elites do that impact you. So without further ado, let's welcome to the ambition stage our financial guru. That's what I'm ordaining him at this point. Paul Musson. Hi, Paul. Oh, okay. So this is going to be good stuff. So, like I said, we're a little glitchy, but there we go. Here we go. Today's a little glitchy day, technology. How are you today, Paul?
I'm doing great, M.A.Y.A. It's great to be here.
Yes, I have so been looking forward to this conversation because one of my gripes, Paul, has always been that I always feel that people do not understand economics. And I feel that is a dangerous place to not be aware or knowledgeable of because almost everything we do is influenced or impacted by our financial wellness. So you have 30 plus years in the field, obviously working at very high levels. So you have really got to see the inner workings of how financial systems work. Tell us a bit about you and how you got to being this financial guru.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call myself a financial guru, but thank you. I'm a finance guy. And yeah, I didn't know I wanted to be a finance guy. I took a long route through university. I just had a thirst for knowledge and reading philosophy and history and stuff. And then I was always good at math, not a genius, but good at math. And I just decided one day I want to analyze companies, do research. I just thought it would be so much fun. And then over time, over many years, I eventually got there, and it ended up being a lot more fun than I even imagined it ever could be. But along the way, when I was having fun doing analysis and investing in businesses, my great passion started turning to communication and education and empowering people. Our clients were primarily financial advisors, so stockbrokers, financial planners. And when I first started out making presentations to my clients, my main goal was to impress them with how smart I was. So I'd use big words and make things a little bit complicated, and then hopefully the client would think, I didn't really understand what he was saying, but he sounds pretty smart, so I'll take a chance and give him some of my clients' money. But then over time, I wasn't speaking pure truth. And so over time, I started contradicting myself and getting caught up in little white lies. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just going to tell people the truth and help them and empower them. And if they don't like it, well, that's a good outcome because that means I'm not right for them. And so I want to help them do the best job possible for their clients because it's a serious business. We're trying to get people to their long-term financial goals. It's not about me, right? I mean, we all need to benefit from it. And boy, it just, it was so, well, first surprising the impact that it had for me that, we ended up getting even more sales, because people started to trust me. And then I started witnessing what was going on in financial markets, which we'll talk about. And and how central banks, with good intentions, by the way, it's not a conspiracy theory, what's been going on, but there were good intentions. They thought that by driving the asset prices higher, even though the rich would inordinately benefit from that over time the benefits would trickle down to everybody else. They haven't, and they won't. And so my book attempts to, so people, like you were saying earlier, people know that, like, their intuition is correct. They know they're getting screwed by the system.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't know how. And it has like a real emotional impact on your mental health and frustration. And then it turns into anger. And then people they know they're getting screwed. They don't know how. And so then it's very natural to look for someone to blame. And so I believe that the political divide, not only in the US, but other countries, is largely a result of this, because then it's natural for Republicans to blame Democrats and Democrats to blame Republicans. And I'm in Canada, we're having the same thing here now with conservatives versus liberals, and all beautiful people on both sides, right? But they can't even talk to each other anymore. And it's because they don't understand the root cause of why they're struggling, what is happening. And so my book is written in very easy to understand terms, step-by-step analogies. And if somebody picks it up, they will understand. And I have a free blog as well. If somebody wants to sign up for that, we can put the details later, which is a weekly blog. Mm-hmm. And I try to decode and unmask a lot of the nonsense that's in the headlines, so people will understand what's going on.
And I did, you said a lot of fantastic media like resources. So I checked everything out and saw the blog, and I liked it. I saw the written blog. There was an audio component to it. Very informative. And the way you write it is in a lay way that I believe everyone can understand. But you said something that, as we're kind of doing, like, I guess, kind of understanding finances like 101 in a way. One, you said something that in my mind instantly kind of talked about creating the system and it trickling down. So instantly, I'm probably about to truly date myself, I thought about Ronald Reagan talking about trickle-down economics. Is it kind of the same concept of what? I know. But isn't that kind of the same concept of eventually that the wealth will flow its way down, to, like, I guess you could say the base of the pyramid, so to speak?
Yeah. And the Reaganomics trickle-down economics is different from this trickle-down. The Reagan trickle-down economics was based largely on something called supply-side economics. Now, essentially what it means is if you reduce tax rates, then people will invest more, the economy will become more productive, and yes, the wealthy will benefit most from those reductions in tax rates, but don't worry, all the benefits will trickle down to everybody else. And they do to a certain degree, but within reason. And then it comes a time when they don't. And so it's related, but not the same.
So that, how you just explained it, and I do remember more of those details. So you said it's not the same. So what makes this type of trickle down different?
So the previous trickle down was based on lowering tax rates. This trickle down is based on driving asset prices higher. And so let me back up a little bit. And one of the reasons this has happened and why policymakers think this is going to work is because they don't understand the difference between capital and money, which we can talk about in a second. But asset prices, if asset prices are going higher, let's say at the stock market, for companies, what they do is they take capital from investors and they put it to productive use, and they create more capital. So if you invest in Apple takes your capital, they put it to productive use and research and innovation, and they make better iPhones and Macs and all this kind of stuff. So that's really good. They're creating capital, and their share price rises to reflect the fact that more capital is being produced in the economy. And if all the companies in the stock market are putting capital to productive use, that means they're creating more capital. There's more wealth for everybody in the world, and the stock market rises to reflect that fact. But if stock markets are rising not because more capital is being produced, but because the central bank takes the interest rate down to zero to drive stock markets higher, all that's happening is stock markets are going higher not because there's more capital being produced, but people are being forced to pay more for the capital that is being produced. It's just getting more expensive. Or if the central bank starts printing money, it's called quantitative easing. If they start printing money to buy assets to create scarcity of certain securities, that also drives stock markets higher. It's called the portfolio effect, which we can go into if you're interested. That also drives, but the stock markets are going higher, not because more capital is being created, but because the Federal Reserve is printing money out of thin air to buy assets. And so there's no real wealth creation. That just results in a wealth redistribution within society. So, but then they believe that by doing this, people will feel wealthier, they'll spend more, and then everyone else will benefit from that. Well, guess what? You've now got a housing affordability crisis. I mean, if you think it's bad in the US, come up here to Canada or go across to Australia. It's way worse. So what they did was they, in coming out of the 2001 recession in the US, which was a very mild recession, it was only 1 quarter of economic contraction. And they decided to create, this is my opinion now, that they decided to create a wealth effect by driving housing prices higher. And there were certain market commentators like Paul Krugman and Paul McCulley who were urging them on. So they took interest rates down to 1 and left them there, despite the fact that the economy was growing. Now, this made mortgage payments in the short term more affordable for people. So for demand for housing soared. And it turned into this speculative frenzy. And then you know what happened. We had that housing market crash. Where you had 25% of mortgages in the US were underwater, which meant that they were negative equity, which meant the mortgage was worth more than the house. And this was a terrible situation for people to be in. Now, and then they continued to do that after the great financial crisis in 08, 09, and then post-COVID, with the Federal Reserve buying over $1 trillion of mortgage-backed securities, which drove the mortgage rate down to historic low levels, which sent demand through the roof and housing prices with it. So now, I'll just back up for 1 second. Remember earlier I was talking about when companies, they take capital and they put it to productive use and they create more capital.
Yes.
And that pushes their share price higher. So share prices should rise if capital is being produced. But for houses, they're not productive assets. So I live in the suburbs of Toronto, and we bought our house in 2001, just when these wealth effect policies really took off in earnest. And since then, our house has gone up 4 times in price. So what was our contribution to society? What capital did we create to justify making 4 times on our home? We didn't do anything. Our house is not producing 4 times as much stuff. It hasn't grown 4 times in size. It hasn't relocated to a glorious oceanfront view. It's the same economic good that, due to policy, the next generation, if they want to buy it from us, they have to pay 4 times what we paid for it. So our benefit comes at the next generation's expense, or a newcomer to our country. And it's creating like a class war, like a generational struggle between baby boomers like me, I'm 63, and the next generation. Now the average age of the first-time home buyer is significantly older than it was 20, 30 years ago. And this is why. And so policymakers, I don't believe for a second that they thought they were going to cause a housing affordability crisis. But that's what they did. And now they're stuck, because to fix it, you need to stop bailing out Wall Street. You need to allow interest rates to be determined by natural forces. which means that eventually house prices, they will steadily decline, which is fine for me because I've got a lot of equity built up in my home, but it's not good for people who recently bought a home at very high prices, and they're going to be underwater on the equity in their home. And so there's no easy way out of this. There's this economist called Thomas Sowell, fantastic economist. He says that in economics, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. So what's the trade-off here?
Right.
And I believe that, you know, the average person is very smart, particularly when it comes down to what to do with their own hard-earned capital. They don't need policymakers telling them how much they should spend or how much they should save or what price they should pay for a good or a car or a house. They know. And if people refuse to spend their money, then policymakers distort interest rates to very low levels to try and force people to buy these assets that they don't want to buy. And that's what sort of causes all of this trouble. But again, they think that, don't worry, you'll be better off, despite the fact that you don't want to do this. And yeah, so that's sort of the topic of my book. And there is a way out. I offer 10 steps at the end of the book.
Okay.
That need to be taken. But the first step, really, which I should have made it the first step, but the whole reason I wrote the book is to empower people with truth, knowledge, understanding. Now, there's an old saying that the people always get the government that they deserve. Well, i.e., you voted for them, so stop complaining. Well, that's only true. People only get the government they deserve if they actually know what's going on. And as we were saying, I believe that most people don't actually understand how things are working and how the system is working against them. And so it's hard to demand the right sort of actions or decision-making from your leader when you don't know what's going on. And our leaders and politicians, they're good people. They want to do the right thing, but many of them also don't understand what's going on. And if they did, to do the right thing today would be political suicide because most people are not asking for it. So you'll do the right thing and you'll be voted out. And so empowering people with the knowledge, understanding, and people having empathy as well. I think when you have more understanding about what the hell's going on, it's easier to have empathy for people who are making certain decisions that you don't agree with, because now you can see, oh, I know what their motive was. I didn't realize that, they didn't really have bad intentions. And a lot of the anger starts to dissipate. Don't understand, and it's very easy and kind of fun to be angry. People like being angry sometimes,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Yeah. My wife likes being angry at me sometimes, that's for sure. So
no comment, Paul. No comment. No. So I mean, the thing is, okay, the book is fantastic, and to me, I feel like if you do not feel you are financially astute, that's okay. It starts with learning, but I also feel at this point people need to start to really educate their children, because I know a couple of the topics. And one thing before I ask you this question, I want you to define something for people, because you could say something and I feel I understand it, but someone else might say, I don't, what does that entail? So when you say the idea of central banks, what does that entail specifically?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that question. So the central bank is the entity that Congress has allowed to effectively control the money supply, control the amount of money that is in the economy. And so, without going into too much technical details, they create bank reserves out of thin air. And so, let's say it's a Citigroup. They'll create bank reserves out of thin air. They'll buy assets from Citigroup and credit Citigroup's bank account at the Federal Reserve with, let's say, $10 billion. Now, Citigroup can then use that $10 billion to create loans, create deposits. And the more reserves that are created, the more deposits and loans that are created. And that's how the money system works. Sort of cut some corners,
Mhm.
but they're the only entity that can actually create money. Yeah, so that's what central banks do, and they control the interest rate as well.
And they control the interest rate. Okay.
Short-term interest rates they
Short
control,
terms.
and it
Okay.
also has an impact on longer-term interest rates, on 10-year interest rates as well, and they can impact 10-year interest rates even more by printing money and buying those assets. So there's a couple of ways that they can control longer-term interest rates.
You're tuned into Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and our guest on the Ambition stage this episode is Paul Musson, who is the founder of Paddington Capital Management, and we're talking money, something that people often don't want to talk about. They often just want to either try to make it or spend it, and not understanding what that really means for them. And I feel, especially currently, as we hear so many things about recessions and just tariffs, people don't know what to make a lot of this stuff, Paul. They just don't. They're lost. One of the things I've been trying to push, that's my mantra for the rest of the year, is be informed, not influenced.
Yes.
And when I talk to someone about, okay, at some point we probably should be over the idea of 1% of people controlling so much of the wealth in this country, and somehow a lot of people, as I'm watching, have this, I guess you can say, trust that, but yeah, they may have a majority of the money, but they're saying they're going to put this plan in place and we're going to end up benefiting from that. And somehow I want to say I've yet to see it ever really truly pan out that way.
Yeah.
And in your book, I know you address some of these things. So talk a bit about, I know one of the things topic wise that kind of jumped out at me is explain how the current economic policies either can contribute to wealth disparity, because I don't think people get that piece right now.
Yeah. So I'll start with the fact that, there should be wealth differences, but the wealth differences should be based on your contributions to society, your efforts, your willingness to take a chance. So the way a free market system is supposed to work is that whatever capital you have, whatever wealth you have, it's supposed to be a reflection of the wealth that you've created and then fairly exchanged with someone else. So all the wealth that you have, cumulatively out there are other people with the same amount of wealth. So you earned or you obtained capital by creating it and then exchanging it with others. One of the issues is that people don't understand the difference between capital and money. Capital is what makes the world go around. So capital is your podcast, your show. You're creating capital and your viewers are consuming the capital that you're creating. It doesn't come at anybody else's expense. So the example I like to give is, let's say you make a bike and I make a suit. So we've both created capital and then we exchange it with each other. So now I've got a bike, you've got a suit. And importantly, it didn't come at anybody else's expense, right? But we don't do a direct exchange. We do what's called indirect exchange through money. Money is what's called the medium of exchange. That's what it's called in economics. All that means is we use money to exchange all the capital that we're producing.
Mm-hmm.
So you make a bike and then you sell it for money and then you use your money to buy my suit. Now, let's say you make 10 bikes and they're nice bikes. So you sell them for $1,000 each. You've got $10,000 in your bank account. Effectively, what you have is those 10 bikes stored up in the money temporarily. You're storing the value of those 10 bikes up in the $10,000. You have $10,000 because you created 10 bikes. That's how you got the money. So the money is a temporary store of the value of the bikes that you created. So now you've got $10,000 in the bank account. You're going to save it to go on a vacation at the end of the year. But before you get a chance to spend your $10,000, the central bank doubles the money supply. Now, when a central bank doubles the money supply, they don't create any capital to obtain that money. They just create it out of thin air, press a few buttons. So it has no capital stored up in it. But it obtains capital as soon as it comes into the economy by extracting capital from the rest of the money that's already in existence. So when they print this new money, it takes 5 of the bikes from your $10,000 and puts it into the new money. And so your bank statement still says you've got $10,000, but instead of storing 10 bikes, it's only storing 5. And now your $10,000 will only buy half as much as it would have done before the central bank doubled the money supply. So anyway, so this is the difference between capital and money. So,
well, okay.
Yeah. So now, just talking about wealth disparity, as I said earlier, there should be wealth disparity based on efforts and contributions to society. So let's say you make 10 bikes, I only make 1 suit. You're going to be wealthier than me because you put in more effort, you created more capital, and then you freely exchange those bikes with other people who created capital. I've got nothing to complain about, So there's nothing wrong with that. But where the problems start is when central banks deliberately drive asset prices higher, when they start printing money or lowering interest rates to unnaturally low levels to drive stock markets higher or housing prices higher. Because when they do that, there's no more capital being produced. People are becoming wealthier, not because they produced more capital. We became wealthier in our home here in Mississauga, not because our house is producing more capital. We benefited from central bank actions that drove interest rates down to 0 to drive our housing price higher, and it comes at somebody else's expense. So increasingly what's happening is that it's becoming a benefit at the expense of somebody else rather than mutual benefit. And I liken it to a game of poker. So at the poker table, there is no wealth being created. Wealth is being redistributed at the table. It's not like everybody walks away from the table wealthier. What happens in a poker game is you end up with 1 winner and a bunch of losers, which for a lot of people in our economy, that's starting to sound really familiar. And it's getting worse. And people, their intuition tells them that the system is wrong.
So you said something that made me think, and now some of the questions are rolling in with people, and I'll share those in a second. But when you talked about that idea of how there can be different levels to wealth, and you said that you talked about, well, hey, if I've got 5 bikes versus your 1 bike, then clearly I'm going to have more. I'm going to have more money because hence I have more capital. But is not also part of the problem that when someone attempts to, let's say, be in a position to create capital, they often hit a lot of roadblocks, like trying to get a loan or trying to get investors. So it's even to be able, like the startup, the seed money. So that made me just think about, well, hence it's a lot of people are often behind the 8 ball because they don't have the resources to be able to create the capital.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I talk about this in my book. And, where there should be equality, but there isn't, is in opportunity. And we should be doing everything possible to help more people have the opportunity to succeed, to thrive, to take a chance. And again, as I say in my book, I mean, if we were successful in this, the world would be like an incredibly amazing place. It'd be way better than it is today because more stuff would be being produced. More capital would be being produced. We'd be fairly exchanging more capital with each other. So, I mean, that's a big issue, a big problem that's not going to be solved overnight. But and there are a lot of people out there who work tirelessly at trying to affect this sort of change. But no, you're absolutely right. It's not equal. And
So 2 of these questions seem like they kind of piggyback on what we're talking about. And I think either a light bulb went off. So let's start with this one. The question was, so what backs money? Since now you've said money and capital are not the same thing, not gold. Because, the old long-term thought was that gold, backed money, which we know is not true. And the big question turns into, is Fort Knox empty? Because that's what people have come to believe. So I think that's a good question. So most people don't get what backs money because some people still think it's the idea of gold.
Yeah. So it's a great question. So money used to be gold. So it wasn't that money was backed by gold. Gold was money. And so it was the gold standard. And so back in like the 1800s and even the early 1900s, if you had a $20 bill, you could take it to your bank and exchange it for gold. Now, they didn't like it when you did that, but it said on it that you could redeem this for gold. Now, what this did was it tied government's hands in terms of printing money, taking on debt. And so they didn't like the gold standard. And so slowly over time, they changed the monetary system. So the first step was in 1933 during the Great Depression, when Franklin Roosevelt, he sort of outlawed individuals owning gold. So you had to hand in or sell your gold to the government. You had no choice. And if you didn't, you could face a fine of $10,000, which was a lot back then, or 10 years in jail. And there are various reasons why he did that. It wasn't the old gold standard. It was a sort of I was going to use a different word, but it wasn't the same gold standard. It was a funky gold standard, let's just say that. And then in 1971, Richard Nixon put the final nail in the coffin of the gold standard, because up until 1971, individuals could not own gold, but central banks around the world, if they had US dollars, they could bring them over to the US and say, we want gold instead of your US dollars. And they were increasingly doing that because in the late 60s and the early 70s, the US was rapidly increasing the money supply to pay for the various programs, pay for the Vietnam War and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So people were worried that their US dollars were going to depreciate in value. So countries like France were taking their gold back. And so today, the money that we have is called fiat money. So fiat is like by decree. It's not, like your listener said, it's not backed by anything.
That is so strange that it's not, because when you say print more money, I was like, well, it sounds like the money doesn't have any value. So is this, and one of your questions, I know now this is sticking out in my head. It's what happens when you have a debt fueled economy that has money that isn't backed or worth anything?
Well, in a way, the money gains value because we all agree to use it to exchange the capital that we're producing. That's the only reason it has value. But in and of itself, it doesn't have any value at all. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that if the central banks around the world would better control the growth in the supply of the money. So it would actually be better. Well, it would actually be better than a gold standard. I think a gold standard would still be very good, but a fiat currency would be a lot cheaper to operate. And but the trouble is, this also makes it easier for policymakers to manipulate the money supply for short-term gain or for short-term political pressure or whatever. And that's what the issue has been, because every time they increase the money supply, it causes distortions within the economy and some benefit at the expense of someone else. Like I gave that example earlier, when the Fed, with the central bank, doubles the money supply, they take half of the bikes out of the money that you already own. So it's not the fiat money system that's the problem. It's the pressures that come to bear for those who are in control of it.
Okay. Another listener posed a question, and for listeners, you guys can all get involved too by just posting a comment, and I can share it with Paul and we can kind of expand on it. I was waiting. The question came up. They don't understand tariffs and why they are good or bad or both.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very topical. So tariffs were a very big thing back in the 1800s in the US. And And some think, I mean, in part they were, okay, let me explain what a tariff is.
Okay.
So a tariff is a tax. So let's say in the US has put tariffs in place. So if, let's say, somebody in the UK, a company in the UK is making bikes, and they want to export them to sell them to the United States, and let's say they're $1,000 bike. When the importer gets that bike in the US, the US company, has to put, let's say, a 10% tax on that bike of $100, and they have to send that $100 to the US government.
Okay.
So now the importer, earlier they were importing $1,000 bikes, and they might sell them for, I don't know, $1,200 or something, just making it up. But now that they've had to pay a $100 tax on that bike as well, it's cost them $1,100. So they're going to increase the price to the US consumer. Unless they can get the UK bike company, I know you're selling them for $1,000, but now I have to pay this tariff. Can you sell them to me for $900 instead, so I don't have to increase the price of the bikes to the US consumer? So then there's all these trade-offs where maybe the exporter from the UK will reduce the price of the bike a little bit to help offset the tax. Maybe the importer will not make quite as much money, and maybe the consumer will pay a little bit more. So that's what the tariff is. Now the reason that they're put in place, it can vary. So there may be some industries, like we saw during COVID, where it was hard to get access to semiconductors. And so for certain industries, you might want to have homegrown manufacturing capability and not have to rely on other countries if another pandemic comes along, or rely on China. That's a big issue right now. If you're worried about, there's hostilities and ill will between the two of us, now they're going to stop exporting the things that we need. So, maybe it was a mistake to export all that manufacturing expertise or shipbuilding expertise to other countries. We need some of it at home. So then they put tariffs on to make it more expensive for Americans to buy the stuff from other countries, and encourage other companies to start building at home in the US rather than building manufacturing sites in other countries. I think and then some think that, well, if we put in tariffs, then we can get other countries to lower their prices, and we'll get all this tax revenue in the US, and then we can lower income taxes for Americans. And so there's all different kinds of reasons and rationale for imposing tariffs. I understand the national security issues in terms of certain types of things you want to be able to manufacture at home. I understand that, but generally tariffs are a bad idea. Like purely from an economic perspective, they're a bad idea. Like if the US is really good at producing one thing and Korea is really good at producing another, economic laws will tell you that you're both better off focusing on the things that you do best and then trading with each other.
Speak to me about, because in saying this, because in my mind, it starts spinning, and I'm sure people my demographic of being like, I'm 53, kind of remember some things. So I remember growing up as a kid, and where I lived at in the Midwest, at that time, companies like US Steel and Caterpillar were big staples, especially where I was from. Matter of fact, a majority of people worked there. I mean, they created so many jobs. And over time, as you know, those particular businesses started to kind of take their production and things outside the US because they found a way to make it cheaper. How do you find a balance with that, Paul? Because I do believe that's something that's complicated, that yes, American workers want to be paid a certain wage, and they should, because our living wage, to be honest, is crap. Most people literally can't live off of $15 an hour when housing costs and food and healthcare, which, by the way, most people don't even understand the healthcare tug of war that's happening right now with the Affordable Health Care Act, aka Obamacare. They don't understand why it exists. They misunderstand it. But how do we find this balance when obviously you have the idea of capital and capitalism? Of course, US Steel wanted to make more money, and they didn't want to necessarily pay those U.S. workers. So what becomes, I guess, the middle ground on this to make it make sense if you want manufacturers to come back?
Yeah. So, first thing I would say is that, for like minimum wage, I mean, we all want people to be paid more money, right? But the issue typically is not minimum wage. It's the prices of things that have been driven higher by central banks.
Yes.
So like 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, if you were middle class, you had no problem buying a home. Like, if you for so many people, it's completely out of reach. And it's not because of the amount of money that they're earning, it's because of the prices of everything going up. Now, in terms of your question about, should companies like U.S. Steel be effectively exporting all the jobs to other countries? And so then and I don't know the answer, to be honest with you. I think this is more of a question about ideology.
Okay.
But I think it's a question that people can more easily answer if they understand all the trade-offs. And so when you export jobs or export manufacturing to low-cost countries, I mean, the initial benefit, and it goes on for a number of years, is that consumers in America are paying much lower prices for the stuff that they're buying. And of course, companies are making more money. And so it looks like everybody's winning, except for the people who were doing those jobs.
Yes.
And, when you're younger, and, if you lose your job or your company would all of a sudden set up overseas, it's easier to retrain, re-educate yourself. We have unemployment insurance, that take care of us for a while and help us get back on our feet. But, if you've been a steel worker all your life and you're 55 years old and all of a sudden you got to, it's not as easy to retrain.
No.
But conversely, like if we keep the manufacturing at home, then the prices that we pay for cars and washing machines will probably be higher than they otherwise would have been. That's the trade-off.
That's the trade-off.
And so, but I think that would be the approach that we all have to think about. What do we want? But we don't really have a chance to contribute to that conversation. And so I don't know what the right answer is. It's probably a mix. It's probably keep some at home. Don't send all of it overseas. I think maybe we're realizing that we did go too far by exporting all those jobs. And now we have the Rust Belt. And it's sad when you see parts of America like that, where it used to be these great big factories and,
Yes. And I think that's the thing that people don't probably maybe remember or know. But when I look at the town where I'm from, which I always say it kind of gets its little strange, like kind of reputation for being, it's, you're from here. And I'm like, but it's it's a town of 140,000 people that initially was a big hub for U.S. Steel and Caterpillar when they left. And yet this town continued to thrive. It sits on interstates. So things like shipping and things probably were part of it, but also the leadership along the way brought in other things like riverboats for gambling. And then there was a NASCAR track that was built and an HR. So they found ways to keep bringing things in. I do believe the shipping corridors, though, being on two major expressways, I do believe was a huge reason of why it could sustain, because of the shipping and transportation industry.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. I think if people could see like some of those places like in Allentown, Pennsylvania, when you see those empty factories that are now rusted out, or even Detroit, which used to be our automotive kind of hub, just struggling, you would see this is what happens when things shift, and not necessarily in a good way. Okay, a final kind of thought, because when I see things like debt fueled, I'm like, oh, okay, we all know what it feels like to have debt. But part of one of the things I think was a big discussion topic, especially within your book, was the illusion of free money. Paul, there's free money. And where is it? And how come I don't get any?
It doesn't hasn't been trickling down to you, Maya?
No, it's not.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, and it said money. I talk about it in a couple of different ways in the book. when central banks take interest rates down to zero, you'll hear certain commentators saying that money is free now, so we should be borrowing and spending it. Well, the money's still not free. You still have to pay it back. It's just that the interest rate you're paying on it is zero. So if you borrow $10,000, you can't just go and spend it and then, okay, forget about it. No, you still have to pay that money back. So there's all these sort of terminologies and sayings that get sort of misconstrued in economics, But it is free for the U.S. government to create money. They can create money out of nothing. And there are some economists out there who mistakenly believe that because the U.S. can print as much money as it wants for free, that it would be irresponsible for the U.S. government not to take on more debt, to not spend even more money than they're taking in taxes. And they say, well, like if we need to pay off the debt, we'll just print the money. Well, as I said earlier, every time you print money, like it's extracting 5 bikes from your money that you already have, the impact is what they call, it's not neutral on the economy. It doesn't have the same impact on all the people within the economy. It benefits some at the expense of somebody else. So yes, it's free, but most people are not benefiting from this free money. They get harmed by it. And but it's hard for people to connect the dots from actions to consequence. And so it's hard to put their finger on who the perpetrators are for the fact that I can't afford a home, that food costs continue to go through the roof. And I talk about this in my book as well, like inflation is a real problem, but it's understated. So again, I think it's good intentions, but they will change the numbers to make inflation look like it's not as high as it is. And they do things like called hedonic adjustments. So if you buy a car and the price went up 10%, but the quality of the car went up 10% as well, the government will tell you that the price didn't go up, even though it's 10% higher.
Mm-hmm.
So in the actual inflation numbers, they'll say that car prices didn't go up, but despite the fact you can't afford it just because it went up 10%. So from 1996, I think it was, to 2008, car prices went up something like 50% in total. But according to the government statistics, car prices actually fell over that 12-year period because they were increasing in quality. They were saying you're getting more car for your dollar. Mm-hmm. So there's actually no inflation. You know what I mean? So right. It's hard to believe any of the stuff that's coming out of government because, again, your intuition will tell you, your gut will tell you, no, I am paying more, even though the government's telling you that you're not.
Hence the importance of financial literacy, which people truly take for granted. So I know someone could be listening to this and they might be like, okay, wow, this is a lot. And I don't even know where to begin with this. So you have your blog. So tell us a bit about the blog you have and kind of maybe how that for some people can be a good starting point to begin to increase their financial knowledge.
Yeah. Thank you, Maya. So my blog is called Paulitical Economy. We like puns in our house. So it's Paul, my first name, Paul, instead of political, Paulitical Economy.com. Same website is Paddington Capital MGMT.com. And so you can just put your email in there and you'll get free weekly updates when I post. And I've got all my past posts up there and interviews such as this are on there. I've got my book summary and we'll be doing other stuff as time goes on. And so, so all that's free. And then my book, I've had to cut corners a little bit in our discussion, but in my book, I go very slowly, one step at a time. What is money? 3 of the first 4 chapters are just about money and what it is.
Okay.
And so it's, as you said, it's called Capital Offence, Why Some Benefit at Your Expense. And you can get that on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, Thrift Books, other online retailers. And that's it.
It's a lot. And I think I love the title of the book, Capital Offence, why some benefit at your expense. And if that is not the thing, Paul, that doesn't make people have an aha moment, like, wait, someone's benefiting at my expense? Absolutely. And it's probably been going on for generations in your family. Because let's
Yeah,
be honest, if you're not sitting in a family that's wealthy, or let's say financially doing well, there's a chance that somebody has been benefiting from your family for a long time, and no one realized it because they didn't understand money or
absolutely.
capital.
Absolutely. That's why I wrote the book.
It's a good book. I definitely think everyone should check it out. I've been like running right now. You'll see the ticker on the page. It has the website you can go to. So for everybody who wants to learn more about this, you can of course always go to the website, which is a ticker. It's www.paddingtoncapitalmanagement, which is MGMT, of course, the abbreviation.com, to learn more about. Obviously, the blog is there. It has the link to click to get to the book, Amazon and all those things. So everything is right there in a landing spot. Of course, I encourage people to get social with Paul as well. Facebook, Instagram, and X at Paddington Cap as well. People, it's time to like really get your financial knowledge up, because choosing to not be financial literate at this point, it's a detriment far beyond what people realize, especially if they have the idea, Paul, that they want to be a homeowner. And the thing is, okay, I'm not going to say maybe the ship has sailed for us old folks that, I'm 53 and us up. If we haven't figured it out by now, shame on us. I'm not exactly sure our comeback is going to work at this point. But here's what I look at: grandchildren, younger generations. And if you're a young person beginning to raise your family, then start with educating yourself and then taking this to your children. Because to me, the knowledge piece is where people turn the corner. When you've been working with people, would you say when they have that aha moment, they can change their financial behaviors moving forward when they really truly understand how things work?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, the reason younger people are finding life hard or can't afford a home is not their fault. And to your point, like the financial literacy and then being able to demand different behavior from our policymakers is crucial. And our policymakers are good people. They will do it. I truly believe that. But it all starts with us, people who are not in the finance industry or economics or what. You don't have to be. You need a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be, and if we don't change things, this will be the first time in a modern era that the next generation will be worse off than the one preceded it.
Could you say that one more time? Because
That,
I don't think that's sinking in for people.
yeah, so this will be the first time in modern history, unless we change things, that the next generation, younger people, will be worse off than the generation that preceded it, i.e. us. And so we bear a big responsibility to help the younger generation to affect change, so that will not be the case, so that they will be better off than us, just like we were better off than our parents, and our parents were better off than our grandparents. That's the way it's supposed to work. And it's a moral issue, in my opinion. And so we need to make change.
Paul, thank you so much for checking into the show. We could probably have hours of discussion on this, because not just 1 hour can cover what people need to learn financially to improve their overall just financial wealth, because wealth is health. And when people struggle financially, it affects them emotionally and mentally. And this is why I bring topics like this to the table, because everything you do in life generally has an emotional attachment, and money is a big emotional experience for most people across the board.
No, for sure.
Thank you for checking in and talking with my listeners. I so appreciate that.
Well, thank you. It's been great being here, Maya.
All right, everybody. That was Paul. He was an amazing guest. Everyone, jump out there and definitely, without a doubt, grab a copy of Paul's book, Capital Offence: Why Some Benefit at Your Expense. Learn more about what Paul is doing with his financial endeavors and his passions for creating financial awareness. Remember, visit Paddington Capital MGMT, abbreviation for management.com, and the links to get the book as well as his blog, Paulitical Economy. It's right there. You can get it. So make sure you definitely check those things out. I encourage people to get social, which means, something when he has a new blog being posted or things like that, or giving tidbits. You know what? This is something I feel like when it comes to a social media platform, this should be within your wheelhouse. So you can find Paul on Facebook, Instagram, as well as on X at Paddington Cap as well. So make sure everybody, you go to the website, you share it. This is an episode that I believe that everybody can legitimately get something from it. 76 episodes in the book is absolutely amazing. We talked the wealth gap, and we didn't even jump too deep into the wealth gap because we may not have been able to climb out if we would have done it with our veteran investment expert, Paul Musson. It was absolutely amazing. I love when people create time. This is what passion and purpose looks like. And this is why I bring on individuals that they have found their passion and purpose and intersected with their ambition to be literally empathetic, but also to help others. This is the difference. To have knowledge like Paul has, but to not share it with others would be a waste. And he has a book that's amazing. That one, if you are not financially literate, grab this book and then share it with your grandkids, your kids, because how you change generational wealth is through education, understanding, and building. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I always appreciate the support. The whole purpose of this podcast is to help you to identify your ambition, harness that motivation to help you to acquire the success and satisfaction you want in your everyday life, not just life. I want you to be present. It's about every day, not just the future. Remember, you can always find every episode to M.A.Y.A on any podcast platform that's out there. I'm on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify platforms. Just search M.A.Y.A. My Ambition, Your Ambition. Of course, you can always as well listen to episodes of the show on my website, www.maya-speaks.com. You can grab it there. Make it easy on yourself, though. Just subscribe and share my YouTube channel at M.A.Y.A Speaks to You, and you'll never miss an episode. But that's also how you get social with me. You can find me at M.A.Y.A Speaks to You via Facebook, IG, and X. I try to post everything there. But again, there's so many ways you connect. The website is usually a good spot. Make sure when you're on the website, though, you do check out the blogs I have there. There is the inspirational blog that I have. That's just something for you to think about for the week, not daily, because I want you to deeply process things. And of course, everyone knows that I do have my Me on Pause blog that I'm super, super passionate about. All right, everyone. So I always end the show with something that means a lot to me. Until next time, remember, your present becomes your past and your future is no more. So make the most of every day. By the way, those are not my words. I cannot take credit for it. That is Pearl Jam. I gotta give my group credit for it. But think about that. People always want to live in the future, but what they don't realize is the future is tomorrow. So if you're not cultivating your today, what is your future actually going to look like? Chew on that. Until next time, we are not here next week. I'll be off, but I'll be back the following week, and it just gets better with the next upcoming guest, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.